6 months had passed since the Velkari first attacked Titan Station. 6 months of fear, chaos, and defeat for the species who had mocked humanity. Now the Galactic Council gathered again at Kepler Prime, but the atmosphere was completely different. The Grand Assembly Hall was packed with delegates, but there was no celebration. No confident speeches, just nervous waiting, because this time humanity had called the meeting. The UES Nightfall arrived at the station with an escort of 20 warships. The massive dreadnought dwarfed every other vessel in the area. Its hull was black as space itself, covered in the same stealth coating that had made human ships invisible during the war. But today, humanity wanted to be seen. Admiral Jake Morrison stood at the human delegation platform. Next to him were Amy Carter, Lisa Hayes, and Danny Pierce. Behind them, a full honor guard in military dress uniforms. Earth was done being dismissed as primitive. The Thalian mediator's crystalline form pulsed with cautious colors. The Council recognizes Admiral Morrison of Earth. Jake stepped forward. He didn't look nervous or apologetic. He looked like a man who had won a war and knew it. 6 months ago, I stood in this chamber and warned you, Jake said, his voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. I told you that humanity would defend itself, that we had capabilities you didn't understand, that attacking us would be a mistake. The chamber was silent. Every delegate remembered that day, remembered laughing at the humans, remembered dismissing their warnings. You didn't listen, Jake continued. The Velkari Empire sent 40 warships to Titan Station. We disabled or destroyed them all. The Draxan Empire sent 300 ships to Mars. Less than 100 made it home. And in the months since, we've shown you what happens when you underestimate the species that learn to hunt in the dark. Images appeared on the displays around the chamber. Velkari ships drifting in space, their crews too traumatized to function. Draxan warriors fleeing the asteroid belt. Research stations broken into. Trade routes abandoned. The evidence of human dominance was overwhelming. The Velkari ambassador stood, his insectoid form trembling. Admiral Morrison, on behalf of the Velkari Empire, I formally apologize for our attack on your colony. It was a grievous error in judgment. We beg for mercy. The Draxan representative, a young warrior who had replaced the disgraced war chief, spoke next. The Draxan Empire acknowledges our defeat. We offer reparations for damages and agree to any terms you set. Please end this nightmare. Jake let the words hang in the air for a moment. This was the moment humanity had fought for, the respect they deserved. But it wasn't enough to just win. They needed to make sure this peace would last. Here are Earth's terms, Jake said. First, all human colonies are recognized as sovereign territory. No alien military vessels enter our space without permission. Any violation will be considered an act of war. The delegates nodded frantically. No one wanted another war with humanity. Second, trade routes through human space must follow our regulations. We control who passes through, what they carry, and where they go. Any species that threatens human safety will be banned from our territory. More nods. The galaxy had learned that human territory was no longer open for anyone to claim. Third, and most important, Jake continued, and his voice grew harder. Every species in this council needs to understand what you learned in the past 6 months. Humanity is not aggressive. We don't want to conquer your worlds or rule your empires, but we will not be threatened. We will not be bullied, and we will never, ever be underestimated again. Amy Carter activated a new display. This one showed something that made several delegates gasp in fear. It was a map of Velkari space, but it wasn't a regular map. It showed human stealth ships positioned near every major Velkari military installation, shipyard, and command center. For the past 6 months, Amy said, we've been mapping your defenses, learning your weaknesses, positioning our forces. If we wanted to, we could cripple the Velkari Empire in a single coordinated strike. A second map appeared, this one of Draxan space. Same thing. Human ships everywhere, invisible and waiting. We could do the same to the Draxan, Danny Pierce added, or any other species that threatens us. We know where you build your ships, where you train your soldiers, where your leaders sleep at night. We're in your space right now and you never knew it. The horror on the delegates' faces was clear. The humans had proven they could fight. Now they were proving they could destroy entire civilizations if they chose to. Lisa Hayes stepped forward. But we don't want to. Humanity came to space hoping to find friends, allies, partners. We still want that. The difference is, now you understand the cost of trying to take advantage of us. The Thalian mediator's chimes were subdued, almost sad. Admiral Morrison, what do you want from us? You have proven your strength. You have defeated your enemies. What is your ultimate goal? Jake looked at the crystalline being, the same one who had dismissed humanity's warning 6 months ago. We want you to remember that humanity doesn't need to be the biggest species to be the most dangerous. We don't need the oldest civilization to be the smartest. We don't need overwhelming numbers to win wars. He gestured at the images of human ships lurking in alien space. We survived on a planet that tried to kill us every day. We evolved in darkness, learned to hunt in it, mastered it. Space is just a bigger darkness, and we're very, very good at turning darkness into our weapon. The vote was unanimous. Every species on the Council accepted Earth's terms. New treaties were drafted and signed. Human colonies gained full recognition. Trade agreements were rewritten to favor Earth, and most importantly, humanity took its place as a major power in the galaxy. But Jake knew the real victory wasn't the treaties or the territory. It was the fear in the aliens' eyes, the respect in their voices, the understanding that Earth was not a species to be mocked or threatened. After the session ended, Jake stood on the observation deck of the Nightfall, looking out at the stars. Amy joined him, her uniform showing the new rank insignia of captain. Do you think it'll last? She asked. The peace, I mean. Jake considered the question carefully. As long as they remember what we taught them, that somewhere in the dark humanity is watching, that we're always hunting, that we're the species that turns our weaknesses into strengths and our enemies' strengths into weaknesses. And if they forget? Jake smiled, but it wasn't a warm expression. Then we remind them, gently at first, then not so gently. Below them, the Nightfall's engines pulsed with quiet power. Around Kepler Prime, human warships maintained position, a subtle reminder of Earth's capabilities. And throughout the galaxy, on worlds the Council didn't even know were being watched, human stealth ships continued their vigil. The galaxy had learned its lesson, but humanity would never forget the price of being underestimated. They had come to space offering peace and been met with mockery. They had warned their enemies and been laughed at. So they had done what humans always did when threatened. They adapted. They overcame. They won. The species from the small blue planet, the ones with no natural weapons or armor, the ones who seemed weak and soft, had become the galaxy's apex predator. Not through size or strength, but through intelligence, determination, and the willingness to fight wars in ways no one else had imagined. The Valkyrie would tell stories about the Battle of Titan Station for generations. Parents would warn their children about the dangers of traveling too far from home, where humans might be watching. The Draxan would remember the asteroid belt as the place where their empire's pride was broken, where they learned that honor meant nothing against an enemy who refused to follow the rules. And across the galaxy, on every world in the Council, the message was clear. Humanity had been mocked as a threat. They had been dismissed as primitives. They had been attacked by species who thought themselves superior. Now those species knew the truth. In the darkness of space, humanity was the nightmare, the hunters, the predators that waited in shadows and struck without mercy. The galaxy would never underestimate Earth again. And if they ever forgot, well, humans were very good at teaching lessons, especially in the dark. Jake looked at Amy and spoke quietly. You know what the best part is? We didn't even use our best weapons. We didn't show them everything we can do. Amy raised an eyebrow. You mean there's more? Always, Jake said. Because that's what humans do. We always have a backup plan. Always have something held in reserve. We won this war with stealth and tactics. Imagine what we could do if we really needed to. Amy smiled. Let's hope we never have to find out. Agreed? But it's nice to know we could. They stood together in silence, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, human colonies were growing. Human ships were exploring. Human children were being born in space, the first generation to never know Earth's sky. The future was bright for humanity, and the galaxy had learned to fear the dark. The council chamber was in chaos. Commander Jake Morrison stood near the back of the massive circular room, watching as 17 different alien species argued with each other in dozens of languages. The translation device in his ear struggled to keep up with all the shouting. Beside him, Claire Bennett crossed her arms and frowned. She was humanity's diplomatic liaison, and she had seen plenty of arguments in the 6 months since Earth joined the Galactic Council. But this was different. The aliens were scared. At the center of the chamber, Ambassador Thelnax of the Corvani Empire trembled as he spoke. The tall, blue-skinned alien's voice cracked with emotion. My homeworld is gone. 3 billion Corvani dead in less than a day. The Devourers have returned. A wave of fear swept through the chamber. Jake had heard stories about the Devourers during his training. They were an ancient race of machines that had nearly destroyed the galaxy 10,000 years ago. Everyone thought they were extinct. How many ships attacked your world? Asked a representative from the Threxian Collective, a small reptilian creature with golden scales. Hundreds, Thelnax replied. Maybe thousands. They came from beyond the outer rim. Our defense fleet tried to stop them, but our weapons barely scratched their hulls. They began harvesting our cities, taking everything. Metal, organic matter, energy. Within hours, the planet was a dead rock. Claire leaned close to Jake and whispered, "This is bad, really bad." Jake nodded. He had served in Earth's defense forces for 15 years. He knew what a military crisis looked like, and this was worse than anything he had seen. "What can we do to help?" Before Claire could answer, another ambassador stood up. This one was from the Zephyr Union, a species that looked like floating jellyfish made of light. 3 of our colony worlds have also fallen. The Devourers are moving fast, consuming everything in their path. We sent our entire defensive fleet to stop them. What happened? Someone asked. They were destroyed in less than 20 minutes. The chamber fell silent. Jake felt his stomach tighten. 20 minutes. An entire fleet gone. We must organize a response, declared High Chancellor Vorn, an elderly alien who led the Galactic Council. All species must contribute ships and resources. We will form a united defensive line and stop this threat. With what? Claire said suddenly, her voice cutting through the murmurs. Everyone turned to look at her. She stood up, her face set with determination. Your fleets are designed for exploration and trade, not war. When was the last time any of you fought a real battle? Several aliens made offended noises, but Claire continued. Humanity has been fighting wars for our entire history. We know combat. We know tactics. We know how to survive when something wants to kill us. Let us help. A Threxian representative laughed, a harsh croaking sound. Your species has been in space for barely a century. Your weapons are primitive. Your ships are slow and ugly. What could humanity possibly offer? Jake felt his jaw clench, but Claire just smiled coldly. We offer something you've never needed before. We offer war. The chamber erupted in argument again. Some aliens insisted that humanity was too young, too primitive to help with something this serious. Others pointed out that Earth had nothing to lose by trying. Jake noticed that the Corvani ambassador watched Claire with interest. Finally, High Chancellor Vorn raised his hand for silence. Very well. Humanity may contribute to the defense effort, but you will follow council protocols and obey all strategic commands. Claire bowed slightly. Of course, Chancellor. The meeting continued for another hour as different species pledged ships and resources. Jake watched the numbers appear on the main display screen. It looked impressive until he did the math in his head. Even combined, the Council's defensive fleet was smaller than the force that destroyed the Corvani homeworld. They were going to lose. As the meeting ended, Jake and Claire made their way toward the exit. Ambassador Thelnax intercepted them in the corridor. Up close, Jake could see the exhaustion in the alien's eyes. You really believe your people can fight these machines? Thelnax asked quietly. Claire met his gaze. We've been fighting since we lived in caves. War is what humans do best. It's not something we're proud of, but it's kept us alive. I hope you are right, Thelnax said. Because if the Devourers cannot be stopped, every world in the galaxy will fall. Before Jake could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red emergency lights flashed along the walls. Jake's combat instincts kicked in immediately. He grabbed Claire's arm and pulled her toward a wall panel. What's happening? Claire demanded. Jake pulled up the emergency broadcast on the panel. His blood ran cold. A Corvani refugee fleet is under attack. 12 civilian ships, about 200,000 survivors. They're only 4 light years from here. How long until council ships can reach them? Claire asked. Jake checked the tactical display. 2 hours. Maybe 3. They'll all be dead by then. Jake looked at Claire and they both knew what had to be done. He pulled out his communication device and switched to the emergency military channel. Commander Morrison to UES Vengeance. Captain Mitchell, do you copy? Static crackled, then a voice responded. "This is Captain Ryan Mitchell. We read you, Commander. What's the situation? There's a refugee fleet under attack 4 light years from our position. Council ships can't get there in time. How long would it take you?" There was a pause. Jake could imagine Ryan calculating trajectories and fuel consumption. 35 minutes if we push the engines hard. But Commander, we're a escort group. Just 5 destroyers. If the Devourers are attacking that fleet, I know the odds, Captain, Jake interrupted. But 200,000 civilians are going to die if we don't try. You have your orders. Another pause, longer this time. Then Ryan's voice came back, steady and determined. Understood, Commander. UES Vengeance and Escort Group are breaking orbit now. We'll do what we can. Jake ended the transmission and looked at Claire. She was already accessing the station's communication system. I'm sending the mission details to Earth Command. Admiral Kyle Davis needs to know what's happening. He's going to be furious that we engaged without Council approval, Jake said. Let him be furious, Claire replied. Those people need help now, not after a committee meeting. They made their way to the observation deck. Through the massive windows, Jake could see 5 human warships breaking away from their orbital positions. They weren't sleek or elegant like the alien vessels docked nearby. Human ships were blocky and heavily armored, covered in weapon systems and sensor arrays. They looked exactly like what they were, machines built for war. Do you think they can win? Claire asked quietly. Jake watched the ships accelerate toward the jump point, their engines burning bright against the darkness of space. I think they'll fight like humans always do, until there's nothing left to give. Back in the council chamber, aliens gathered around viewing screens to watch the engagement. Most of them had never seen human ships in combat before. They whispered among themselves, speculating about what would happen. Jake and Claire stood apart from the others, waiting in tense silence. 35 minutes felt like hours. Finally, the communication channel crackled to life. Ryan Mitchell's voice came through, tight with stress but still controlled. Vengeance to Council Station. We have visual on the refugee fleet. 3 Devourer vessels are attacking. They're bigger than anything in our database. Can you engage? Jake asked. We're already committed, Commander. All ships, battle formation. Let's show these machines what humans are made of. The viewing screens lit up with the battle feed. Jake and Claire watched as 5 human destroyers charged toward 3 massive alien machines. Around them, the council members fell silent. The war had begun. Captain Ryan Mitchell gripped the arms of his command chair as the Vengeance shuddered under enemy fire. On the main screen, 3 Devourer vessels loomed like mountains made of metal and death. They were harvesting the refugee ships one by one, tearing them apart with cutting beams that could slice through hull plating like paper. Distance to targets? Ryan asked, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. 30,000 kilometers and closing, replied Lieutenant Amy Patterson from the tactical station. She was young, barely 25, but her hands moved across the controls with practiced precision. All weapon systems are hot. Missile tubes are loaded. Ryan watched as the other 4 human destroyers took up formation around the Vengeance. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but that had never stopped humanity before. All ships, this is Mitchell. Target the lead Devourer vessel. Hit it with everything we have. Make them notice us. The aliens watching from Council Station saw something they had never witnessed before. Human warships didn't use elegant energy weapons or sophisticated shield technology. They used missiles. Hundreds of them. The 5 destroyers opened fire simultaneously. Missiles streaked across the darkness, leaving trails of light behind them. The Devourer vessels began defensive maneuvers, but they were slow compared to the small, fast-moving projectiles. The first wave hit. Nuclear warheads detonated against the lead Devourer's hull, each explosion releasing the energy of a small star. The machine vessel staggered, its forward momentum halting as sections of its armor plating melted away. Target is damaged but still operational, Amy reported. They're turning toward us. Good, Ryan said. All ships, evasive pattern Delta. Keep their attention on us. Back on Council Station, Ambassador Thelnak stared at the viewing screen in disbelief. They're using nuclear weapons. In space combat, Jake Morrison nodded. Every human ship carries them. We've been using nuclear technology for over 300 years. We know how to make them effective. But the radiation, another alien protested. Our ships are shielded, Claire explained. And frankly, we're more worried about staying alive than radiation exposure. On the Vengeance, warning alarms screamed as the Devourers returned fire. Energy beams lanced through space, striking the destroyer's armor. The ship shook violently, throwing crew members against their stations. "Hull breach on Deck 4, someone shouted. "Sealing emergency bulkheads. Keep firing," Ryan ordered. "Target their weapon emplacements. Amy, prepare the railguns." The railguns were humanity's answer to energy weapons. They used electromagnetic force to fire solid metal projectiles at incredible speeds. When a 5-kilogram tungsten rod hits a target at 30 kilometers per second, the kinetic energy alone was devastating. "Railguns firing," Amy announced. The Vengeance's main weapons discharged with a deep thrumming sound that resonated through the entire ship. Solid projectiles, each moving faster than any missile, slammed into the lead Devourer. One of them punched completely through the vessel's hull, creating a massive wound that vented atmosphere and debris into space. But the cost was high. Another Devourer turned its attention to one of the human escorts, the destroyer Defender. The ship tried to evade, but the enemy's targeting was too precise. A cutting beam sliced through the Defender's engine section, and the ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. "Defender is gone," Amy said quietly. "All hands lost." Ryan felt the weight of those deaths, but he couldn't stop to mourn. "Not yet. Continue engagement. All remaining ships focus fire on the damaged target. We need to take at least one of them down." The battle continued for another 10 minutes. The human ships moved like wolves, darting in and out, striking and retreating. The Devourers were powerful, but they weren't used to opponents who fought this way. They expected enemies to stand still and exchange fire, not these small ships that refused to behave predictably. On Earth, Admiral Kyle Davis watched the battle feed from his command center. Around him, military officers monitored every aspect of the engagement. The mood was tense but focused. "The Vengeance is taking heavy damage," one officer reported. "Their main reactor is at 70% capacity." Kyle leaned forward, studying the tactical display. "Get me Senator Victoria Ross. We need to start mobilizing the fleet." Within minutes, the senator's face appeared on the communication screen. She was an older woman with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Admiral, I'm watching the battle." "How bad is it?" "Bad," Kyle admitted. "But Mitchell and his crew are buying us time. If the Devourers are back, this won't be the last attack. We need to prepare for full-scale war." "War," Victoria repeated. "Admiral, Earth has 500 combat vessels. The Council has thousands. Why do they need us?" Kyle pulled up images from the battle. "Because their ships aren't built for this. Look at their designs. They're elegant, efficient, designed for exploration and trade. Our ships are ugly, heavily armored, and covered in weapons. We build warships because we've always had enemies. The Council species have been at peace for thousands of years. They've forgotten how to fight." Victoria was silent for a moment, then nodded. "I'll talk to the other senators. If we're committing to this, we're going all in. Every ship, every soldier, everything we have." "Thank you, Senator." Back in the battle, the lead Devourer finally succumbed to the sustained assault. Its hull fractured in multiple places, internal systems exploding in chain reactions. The massive vessel began to break apart, pieces of it spinning away into space. "Target destroyed," Amy announced, and the bridge crew let out a cheer. But their celebration was short-lived. The remaining 2 Devourers abandoned the refugee fleet and turned their full attention to the human ships. Ryan knew immediately that this was going to end badly. "All ships, cover the refugees and begin retreat," Ryan ordered. "Get them to the jump point." "Captain?" "We can still fight," Amy protested. "That's an order." "Lieutenant." The 3 remaining human destroyers formed a defensive screen between the Devourers and the refugee ships. They fired constantly, using every weapon they had, but it wasn't enough. The enemy vessels were advancing, their weapons tearing chunks out of the human ships. The destroyer Guardian took a direct hit to its bridge. The ship tumbled out of formation, lifeless and dark. Then the Righteous lost its main engines and began drifting helplessly. Ryan watched his fleet die around him. The Vengeance was down to 40% power. Hull breaches on multiple decks. Half the crew were dead or injured. But the refugee ships were almost at the jump point. Just a little longer. "Captain, the refugee fleet has jumped to safety," the navigation officer reported. "All civilian ships are clear." "Good," Ryan said. He looked at the remaining Devourers on the screen, then at his young crew. They were scared but still at their posts, still fighting. He was proud of them. Amy, take an escape pod. Get the remaining crew off the ship, sir. Amy looked at him in confusion. That's an order. Everyone to the escape pods now. What about you? Ryan smiled grimly. Someone needs to keep these machines busy. Go. Amy understood. Tears filled her eyes, but she nodded and began evacuating the crew. Within 5 minutes, the bridge was empty except for Ryan. He sat alone in his command chair, watching the 2 Devourer vessels approach. Computer, set collision course for the nearest Devourer. Maximum speed. The Vengeance turned toward its target, engines burning at full power despite the damage. Ryan engaged the manual override, making sure the ship wouldn't deviate from its course. On Council Station, Jake and Claire watched in horror as they realized what Ryan was doing. He's going to ram them, Jake said. The Vengeance accelerated, faster and faster, a missile made of metal and fury. The Devourers tried to destroy it, but the ship's armored hull absorbed the punishment. 5 kilometers. 3 kilometers. 1. Ryan closed his eyes and thought of Earth. He hoped this would buy humanity enough time. The impact was catastrophic. The Vengeance struck the Devourer at full speed, and both vessels exploded in a massive fireball that lit up space for thousands of kilometers. The shockwave hit the remaining Devourer, sending it spinning away. In that moment, while the last enemy ship recovered, the 2 surviving human destroyers unleashed everything they had left. Missiles, railgun rounds, even their point defense weapons. The damaged Devourer couldn't withstand the assault. It broke apart, joining its companions in death. The battle was over. Lieutenant Amy Patterson, now in command of the surviving ships, transmitted back to Council Station. This is Lieutenant Patterson. The refugee fleet is safe. Enemy vessels destroyed. We have heavy casualties. In the Council chamber, silence reigned. The aliens stared at the screens, processing what they had just witnessed. 5 human ships had faced 3 Devourers and won. The cost was terrible, but they had won. Ambassador Thelnax turned to Jake. Your species fights like nothing I have ever seen. You don't retreat. You don't surrender. No, Jake agreed quietly. We don't. Admiral Kyle Davis appeared on the communication screen, addressing the entire council. Humanity is mobilizing for war. We're sending everything we have. But understand this, we fight our way. We use our weapons, our tactics, our methods. If you want our help, you accept how we do things. High Chancellor Vorn looked at the images of destruction, then at the saved refugee ships. Finally, he nodded. Agreed, Admiral. Welcome to the war. Admiral Kyle Davis stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, humanity's largest battle carrier, and looked at the 200 ships assembled before him. Half were human vessels, blocky and heavily armed. The other half belonged to various alien species, their elegant designs now modified with human weapons and armor plating. Together, they were going to do something insane. They were going to attack the Devourer homeworld. Admiral, all ships report ready, said Commander Jake Morrison from the tactical station. He had transferred from Council Station to join the assault fleet, unwilling to watch from safety while others risked their lives. Kyle nodded. Open a channel to all vessels. Make it broadcast across the entire galaxy. I want everyone to hear this. A moment later, Jake confirmed the channel was open. Kyle took a deep breath and began speaking. This is Admiral Kyle Davis of the United Earth Space Force. In a few minutes, our fleet will jump deep into Devourer territory. Our target is a factory world that produces millions of enemy machines every day. If we destroy it, we can stop the Devourers from replacing their losses. We can win this war. He paused, looking at the faces of his bridge crew, young and old, human and alien, all of them knowing what was coming. I won't lie to you. Most of us won't make it back. The Devourers will throw everything they have at us. But every minute we fight is another minute that civilian worlds have to evacuate. Every ship we destroy is one less that threatens our homes, our families, everything we love. Kyle's voice grew stronger. 6 months ago, the Devourers returned and thought they would sweep across the galaxy unopposed. They didn't count on humanity. They didn't count on all of us standing together, fighting together, dying together if necessary. Today, we show them that this galaxy has teeth. Today, we answer their invasion with fire and steel. Across the fleet, crews cheered. Human and alien voices mixed together in a roar of defiance that echoed through every ship. All vessels, prepare for jump, Kyle ordered. Target coordinates are locked in. We jump in 3, 2, 1. Mark. The fleet vanished in flashes of blue light, crossing vast distances in an instant. When they emerged, they found themselves 6 systems deep into enemy space. And they were not alone. Devourer fleet detected, Jake announced. Multiple contacts. Estimate 400 vessels. Launch all fighters, Kyle commanded. Battle carrier groups advance formation. Destroyers and cruisers form defensive screen. Let's clear a path. The battle began immediately. Devourer ships poured toward them from every direction, their weapons blazing. The human battle carriers launched clouds of fighters, small craft that could dance between the larger ships and strike at vulnerable points. Lieutenant Pete Johnson flew one of those fighters. His hands moved across the controls with practiced ease as he dodged incoming fire. Behind him, his squadron followed, a mix of human and alien pilots who had trained together for months. Tiger Squadron, target those Devourer cruisers on the left flank, Pete ordered. Hit their engine sections. Slow them down. Copy that, Tiger Lead, came the responses. Pete's fighter screamed through space, weaving between laser blasts and missile trails. He locked onto a Devourer cruiser and fired his main cannon. The rounds punched through the enemy's armor, creating explosions that rippled along its hull. All around him, the battle raged. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Debris filled the space between combatants. And slowly, painfully, the human-alien fleet pushed forward. But the cost was terrible. Within the first hour, 30 ships were destroyed. Within 2 hours, that number had doubled. Kyle watched the casualty report scroll across his screen and felt each loss like a physical blow. Admiral, we're receiving a distress call from the cruiser Halifax, Jake reported. They've lost main power and are drifting into enemy fire. Kyle made the hardest decision a commander ever has to make. Tell the Halifax their sacrifice will be remembered. All other ships continue advance. We can't stop. On the Halifax, the crew understood. They kept firing their weapons manually, even as Devourer ships closed in around them. They fought until the very end. The fleet pressed on, fighting through 6 heavily defended systems over the next 8 weeks. Each system cost them ships and lives. Each victory felt hollow when counted against the dead. During a brief rest period between battles, Pete Johnson and his squadron were called to investigate a damaged Devourer command ship. The massive vessel had been crippled by a human cruiser and was drifting powerless. Command wants us to board it, Pete told his team. Gather any intelligence we can before it's destroyed. Board a Devourer ship? Asked one of his pilots, a young woman named Kate Phillips. Are they serious? Dead serious, Pete replied. Suit up. We're going in. The boarding party consisted of 12 soldiers, 6 humans, and 6 aliens. They used a breaching pod to cut through the Devourer ship's hull and enter its dark interior. Emergency lights cast strange shadows as they moved through corridors that seemed designed by machines. For machines. This place gives me the creeps, Kate whispered, her rifle raised. Stay alert, Pete warned. We don't know if there are any active defense systems. They found the command node deep in the ship's center. It was a massive computer core, still partially powered. Pete connected his datapad and began downloading information. What he found changed everything. Admiral Davis needs to see this, Pete said, his voice shaking. Right now. An hour later, Pete stood on the bridge of the Defiance, showing his findings to Kyle and the other commanders. On the screen were images and data recovered from the Devourer command ship. The Devourers aren't just machines, Pete explained. They used to be organic beings, an ancient species called the Vryn. Billions of years ago, they uploaded their consciousness into machine bodies to achieve immortality. But something went wrong. Over time, they lost their emotions, their creativity, their sense of purpose. Now they exist only to consume and replicate, trying to fill a void they can't understand. Jake studied the data. Are you saying they want to die? Some of them do, Pete confirmed. There's a fragment in this command node, a piece of the original Vryn consciousness. It's been trying to shut down the Devourer network for thousands of years. It's begging for someone to end their existence. Kyle felt a chill run down his spine. Can we use this? Dr. Lisa Martinez had been listening from her laboratory. Now her voice came through the communication system. Yes, if I can access their core network, I can create a virus that will cascade through all Devourer systems. It will shut them down permanently. How do we access their core network? Kyle asked. There's only one place where all Devourer systems connect, Lisa said. The factory world you're heading toward. Target Omega. The fleet continued its advance. They had lost 120 ships by the time they reached the final system before target Omega. Only 80 vessels remained, battered and low on ammunition. In the fleet were soldiers like Danny Cooper, who had been promoted and given command of an entire Marine division. Aliens and humans trained together, ready for the ground assault that would be needed. There were pilots like Pete Johnson, who flew despite exhaustion and fear because giving up was not an option. There were scientists like Lisa Martinez, working day and night to create the weapon that would end the war. And there were leaders like Kyle Davis, who carried the weight of thousands of lives on their shoulders and refused to break under the burden. Claire Bennett remained at Council Station, but she had not been idle. She spent every day coordinating with the alien governments, rallying support, ensuring that supplies and reinforcements flowed to the fleet. She broadcast updates about the mission to every world in the galaxy, making sure that everyone knew what humanity was sacrificing. They need to see this, Claire told Ambassador Thelnax. They need to understand what war really costs. Thelnax nodded. In 6 months, the Corvani ambassador had changed. He no longer looked at humans with curiosity or condescension. Now there was respect in his eyes, and sorrow for the terrible price being paid. As the fleet prepared for the final jump to target Omega, Kyle gathered his commanders for one last meeting. Jake, Pete, Danny, and several alien commanders appeared on the communication screens. "This is it," Kyle said simply. "Target Omega is a planet-sized factory. The Devourers will defend it with everything they have. We estimate thousands of enemy ships, maybe tens of thousands. Our job is to get Dr. Martinez to the surface so she can upload the virus to their core network. After that, it doesn't matter what happens to us. The war will be over." "Admiral," Danny said, "my Marines are ready. We'll get the doctor to that network or we'll die trying." "I know you will, Sergeant," Kyle replied. "I have faith in all of you," Pete spoke up. "Sir, for what it's worth, it's been an honor serving with you. With all of you. The honor is ours," said Commander Zixtal, an alien officer who had learned human tactics and now commanded a mixed battle group. "Humanity taught us how to fight, how to be brave. Whatever happens tomorrow, we will make you proud." Kyle felt emotion tighten his throat. "You already have. All of you. Tomorrow we end this war. Tomorrow, we show the Devourers that this galaxy belongs to the living, not the machines. Get some rest. We jump at dawn." The fleet emerged from jump space and faced hell itself. Target Omega filled the viewing screens, a planet that had been completely transformed into a machine. Its surface was covered in factories, weapon platforms, and launch bays, and rising from that nightmare world were ships. Thousands of them, perhaps tens of thousands. They formed a wall of metal between the fleet and their target. Admiral Kyle Davis looked at the impossible odds and smiled grimly. "All ships, this is Davis. You know the mission. You know what's at stake. I won't ask you to do the impossible. I'll just remind you that we're humans, and humans have been doing the impossible since we climbed down from the trees. All ships, weapons free. Show them what we're made of." The UES Defiance led the charge, its massive guns opening fire. Around it, 80 warships followed, human and alien crews working together as one. They had trained for this moment, prepared for this sacrifice. The Devourer fleet met them head-on. The space battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Nuclear warheads detonated like miniature suns. Railguns fired solid projectiles that punched through multiple ships at once. Energy weapons carved burning lines across the darkness. And everywhere, ships were dying. Lieutenant Pete Johnson flew, his fighter through the chaos, leading Tiger Squadron in desperate attack runs against the enemy capital ships. His squadron had started with 30 fighters. Now there were 12. "Tiger 3, break left," Pete shouted into his radio, watching a missile streak past his wingman. Kate Phillips pulled her fighter into a sharp turn, barely avoiding the explosion. "Thanks, lead, that was close." "Stay tight," Pete ordered. "We need to clear a path for the landing craft." The landing craft carried Danny Cooper's Marine Division and Dr. Lisa Martinez. Their mission was simple in concept but nearly impossible. In execution, reach the planet's surface, fight through the Devourer ground forces, and access the core network. Danny stood in the landing craft's troop bay, surrounded by 300 Marines. Half were human, half were various alien species. All of them were ready to die if necessary. 5 minutes to surface, the pilot announced. It's going to be rough. It always is, Danny replied. He checked his rifle one more time, then looked at his troops. Listen up. We've trained for this. We know what to do. Watch each other's backs, follow your training, and remember what we're fighting for. Every world in this galaxy is counting on us. Don't let them down. Yes, Sergeant, the Marines responded. Beside Danny, Crix adjusted his armor nervously. The Threxian had come a long way from the scared scientist Danny had met 6 months ago. Now he was a soldier, hardened by combat and ready for whatever came next. We will succeed, Crix said, though Danny couldn't tell if he was trying to convince Danny or himself. Damn right we will, Danny agreed. The landing craft hit the atmosphere, shaking violently as it descended. Through the windows, Danny could see dozens of other craft following the same path. Many were being shot down by surface defenses, exploding in bright flashes. But enough were getting through. They hit the ground hard, the landing gear absorbing the impact with a screech of metal. The rear ramp dropped, and Danny led his division out into hell. The factory planet's surface was a nightmare of metal and machinery. Assembly lines stretched to the horizon, churning out Devourer ships and ground units at an impossible rate. And defending those factories were thousands of Devourer soldiers. Secure the landing zone, Danny ordered. Heavy weapons target those assembly lines. Engineers, find us a route to the core network. The battle began immediately. Devourer units swarmed toward the landing zone from every direction. Danny's Marines formed defensive positions and opened fire. The sound of gunfire was deafening, mixing with the screams of wounded and the explosions of grenades. Dr. Lisa Martinez stayed in the center of the formation, protected by a squad of elite soldiers. She carried the virus in a portable drive, humanity's last hope compressed into a device smaller than her hand. Doctor, we've located the core network access point, one of the engineers reported. It's 3 kilometers from here, underground. The route is heavily defended. Then we fight our way through, Lisa said firmly. Above the planet, the space battle continued. The UES Defiance had taken catastrophic damage. Its armor was breached in a dozen places. Fires raged through multiple decks and the main reactor was failing. But Kyle Davis refused to abandon his ship. All power to forward weapons, Kyle ordered. We're taking as many of them with us as we can. Jake Morrison, bleeding from a head wound, continued coordinating the fleet from his station. Admiral, the Halifax and the Righteous are both gone. The Vengeance 2 is crippled and drifting. Order the Vengeance 2 to ram the nearest Devourer capital ship, Kyle said. Make their sacrifice count. Through the viewing screen, they watched the crippled destroyer accelerate toward a massive Devourer vessel. The impact created an explosion that destroyed both ships and damaged several others nearby. Casualties are at 70% across the fleet, Jake reported quietly. We've lost more than 50 ships. Kyle knew the numbers. He knew they were losing, but they just needed to hold a little longer. Long enough for Danny to reach the core network. On the surface, Danny's division fought through the Devourer defenses meter by meter. They lost soldiers with every step forward, brave men and women who fell so that others could advance. By the time they reached the entrance to the underground facility, the division had lost half its strength. Keep moving, Danny shouted. We're almost there. The underground facility was a maze of corridors and chambers. Devourer units attacked from every direction, trying to stop the advance. Danny's Marines responded with fire and fury, using every tactic humanity had ever developed. Crix fought beside Danny through it all, saving his life twice when enemy units got too close. The Threxian had fully embraced human military culture, even adopting their battle cries. He shouted human war songs as he fired, his voice mixing with the others. They reached the core network chamber after an hour of brutal underground combat. The chamber was massive, filled with computers and data processing systems that stretched up into darkness. And guarding it was a final Devourer defense force. This is it, Danny said. Dr. Martinez, get ready to upload that virus. Everyone else, we hold this room until she's done, no matter what. The final battle began. Danny's remaining troops formed a defensive circle around Lisa as she worked at the main terminal. The Devourers threw everything they had at the Marines, trying desperately to stop the virus upload. Marines fell one by one, their bodies forming a barrier of flesh and sacrifice. But they kept fighting. They always kept fighting. Lisa's hands flew across the terminal keyboard. The Devourer network was incredibly complex, but she had spent months studying captured technology. She knew how to break through their security. "I'm in," she announced. "Beginning upload now." "How long?" Danny asked, firing his rifle at approaching enemies. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. It seemed like an eternity. In space, Kyle Davis watched his fleet die around him. They were down to 20 ships now, maybe less. The Defiance was dying too, its reactor critical, hull breaching in multiple sections. "Admiral, ground forces report they've reached the core network," Jake said. "Dr. Martinez is uploading the virus." Kyle felt relief flood through him. They had done it. Whatever happened now, the mission was complete. "All remaining ships, maximum firepower," Kyle ordered. "Keep those Devourers away from the planet. Don't let anything through." The surviving vessels formed a final defensive line, human and alien ships fighting side by side, their crews linked by a bond stronger than death. Pete Johnson's fighter squadron was down to 3 craft. Kate Phillips and 1 other pilot were all that remained of the 30 that had started. But they kept flying, kept fighting, because that's what humans did. Underground, Lisa watched the progress bar crawl across her screen. 50%. 60. 70. Around her, Danny's Marines were down to a dozen fighters. They were exhausted, wounded, running out of ammunition. But they held the line. Crix fell, struck by enemy fire. Danny rushed to his side, pulling him behind cover. The Threxian's breathing was labored, his scales losing their color. Did we win?" Crix asked weakly. "Almost," Danny promised. "Just hold on a little longer. 90%, 95, 100%. Upload complete," Lisa announced. "The virus is spreading through their network, across the planet, across the system, across the entire Devourer network." Machines began to shut down. Some went offline peacefully, their ancient Vryn consciousness finally finding the release they had sought for millennia. Others fought the virus, trying to resist, but the code was too sophisticated, too perfect. Within seconds, every Devourer unit on the planet stopped moving. The ones attacking Danny's position simply froze, then collapsed. "It worked," Danny said, hardly believing it. It actually worked. In space, the Devourer fleet began to disintegrate. Ships drifted powerlessly, their weapons going dark. The massive armada that had seemed unstoppable was now nothing but floating debris. Kyle Davis leaned back in his command chair, feeling the weight of the war lift from his shoulders. "All ships, cease fire. The enemy is neutralized." Cheers erupted across the fleet, but they were muted by exhaustion and grief. They had won, but the cost had been terrible.